Okay, so briefly, we'll be talking about process in the next couple of minutes now as a question type. Okay. The foundation is still the same with all the other question types that we've been talking about. The graphs, the maps, the multiple charts, everything. But there are just few peculiarities about process as a question type. And that is where my emphasis will be. Okay, I'm not going to take too much time talking to you about overview, introduction, and all those things, because I believe by now you should have known that. Okay. So I understand Victoria had a section with you about process before. So can I have a few people to tell me their understanding of a process? So just lift your hand, raise your hand, and you can, or I call you. Anybody? Mr. Adigun, were you in the class? Let's start by asking, how many of you were in the class?
I was not in the class, sir.
Victoria had with you about on processes. How many of you were in the class? One. Don't worry, I won't call you. Just let me see your hand. I know you might be hiding your face because you don't want me to call you. Bidemi, were you in the class? You're just two people. Okay, you can lower your hand. So let me quickly walk you through it. Bidemi was there as well. Okay, that's fine. So that means in the next 5 minutes, we should be rounding off this section. It will be more like just a recap of what you've learned. So there are generally maybe like you can say two types of the process questions. Tell you to describe a natural process, maybe a life cycle of something, maybe life cycle of butterfly or something. They can maybe a pregnancy cycle. Sometimes I think I saw a question on CO2 cycle and things like that, and all those water cycles. Okay, so or how cows produce their milk. Those are natural processes, natural events. Okay. I can ask you questions that are not natural, like maybe the process of production. Produce bricks or cement. They can tell you how beers or noodles are produced. They can ask you to describe that. A note of warning here would be in a situation where they ask you to describe what you already know. For example, now maybe you happen to be a bricklayer. Okay, let me say your uncle now used to be a bricklayer, and you worked with him on the site for a number of years before you gain admission to school. So you already know how to mix cement and how to do bricks, and now you are faced with Ielts and they are showing you a process how cement are made. That your background knowledge should be an advantage for you to understand what they are talking about more. But at the same time, it could be a barrier for you when you want to tell Ielts that you already missed one vital process, a step and you want to remind you want to remind them of that step. You want to show that you know more than them. And that's what happens even in tax 2 questions when they give questions that are maybe medical questions or biological questions or things that we feel maybe, okay, since majority of us are nurses, that we will find it easier. These are the questions that people fail most, because at the end of the day, people go overboard. They do over-sabi, and that's you doing over-sabi, no matter how logical your point is, as long as it's not showing on that particular chart, on that particular process that they are giving you, you need to prove to IELTS where you found that point from, and that will come as inaccurate description for you. Okay, maybe you are very good at cooking now, and IELTS is telling you how to make fried rice. They are telling you the process, and you are feeling like, no, they should put oil should be there before you add water and things like that. Those things can actually cause you trouble. I'm mentioning that, but it's important. It does happen. Okay. It does not matter what kind of process they are giving you, still the same skills and the same structure you are going to use. So there are some common problems with these question types. Okay, so I'll just highlight the few common problems and possible ways to avoid or solve them. Then we can talk about the structures as well. The first common problem will be inability to identify key features. Okay. Because every task 1 question will always tell you to describe and to summarize and describe the key features. But in this situation now, you'll be wondering, where are the key features? Unlike line graphs, pie chart, bar charts, processes have no general trend, and there are no key features to identify. And I said you should write that down and don't forget it. Okay. No, there's no key feature. There are no key features by implication, by interpretation. All features are key. All features are key. Write it down and don't forget it. All features are key. You can't afford to be silent about a stage when you are talking about process. When you are talking about a map, you can afford not to talk about a particular structure. When you are talking about bar charts, pie charts, you can ignore any particular data that is not significant or that is negligible. But in process, you cannot be silent. You can't afford to be silent about any part or any stage of the process. So all the stages, they are all key features. There's no point trying to find out where the key features are. All the key features are key. Please put that down and don't forget that all features are key. Okay. Next problem is rigid range of vocabulary. Rigid, non-flexible range of vocabulary, mechanical description. And that's what I mean by this is because in a process, you always have each stages labeled for you. Okay, so when they label for you, you don't have to stick rigidly to the labelings. So you just need to preserve the keywords and the context of the labeling. Okay. For example, now if they label a stage for you as cleaning stage, then label another stage for you as polishing stage, they label another one as packaging stage and distribution stage. These are all in nouns. Okay, so you should be free to paraphrase this keyword. You could say the process begins with washing of the materials. Okay, you are changing that noun to a verb now, action word now, washing of the material, instead of saying cleaning stage or cleaning phase. Okay, after which they are polished. Okay, you are changing polishing stage to maybe next stage where they are polished. So polished here is a verb, polishing here is a noun. You don't have to say the first stage is the cleaning stage, and next to that is the polishing stage, and next to that and after that is packaging. While you are still retaining the keywords, you are still retaining the context of the novel. They are not there for you to stick rigidly to them. Okay, so you can say after which they are distributed, instead of saying after that you move to the distribution stage. So you can always say after that they are distributed. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So distributed and distribution, that's what makes the difference. It looks simple anyway, but very important. Okay, so you have to be flexible in your vocabulary. Don't just say next is, after that, firstly, secondly, thirdly, fourthly, fifthly, sixthly, until you get to hundredly. Don't just continue like that. And I think that's my next point here. Yeah, mechanical description. Okay, we've talked about this a number of times as well. Okay, so don't just say the first step involved is this, the second step is this, the third step is this, the fourth step is this, the fifth step. That is mechanical. Okay, I've told you earlier, mechanical description is a predictable and a non-flexible way of describing. Okay, you don't have to be predictable, you don't have to be rigid with your description. Okay, so don't just say, or you keep saying next is, or overuse of then. You say this started with this, then A, then B, then C. Or you start saying firstly, secondly, thirdly, fourthly. Those are mechanical ways of describing. And the risk is high when you are talking about process, because it's a process. You need to move from one stage to another, So there's that tendency of saying next is, or saying then this, then that, then this, then that. Or you start by saying firstly, secondly, thirdly, fifthly, sixthly. Those are the risks involved. Okay, so you need to be cautious of that. So they are not necessarily wrong. You get what I'm saying? They are not necessarily wrong, but it's going to drop your scores for the coherence and cohesion. If you are mechanical, you can score well for your task achievement, because obviously you've described what is there, but the way you put down your points, they matter as well. Okay, so and that's where mechanical description comes in. So the first solution here is to vary your linkers or your linking words. Okay, so it's extremely important for you to be able to vary your connectors. These are just few examples. You can make a note of them, or if you have other ones. So you talk about firstly, to begin, after that, after which, then, next, in the next stage is this, following this is this, subsequently this, finally this. Okay, so these are examples of connectors you can put together instead of using next, or you overuse firstly, secondly. Okay, so first of all, firstly, to begin, after that, after which, then, next, in the next stage, following this, subsequently, followed by, and finally. Those are different ways you can vary your linker, so you can note that. Another good way to avoid mechanical description is by describing a later stage before the preceding one. I don't like talking about this so much, because sometimes It leaves candidates more confused. But anyway, what I'm talking about here is to avoid being mechanical, you can describe a later stage before the preceding stage. Okay, maybe you have stage one to be, let's say washing. Okay, stage 2 is drying, and stage 3 is ironing. Okay, so let's say that's an example, and to describe this now, one way to describe this would be, okay, if I say the process starts, maybe first of all you have to wash, then you talk about, then you can say, okay, after that the clothes is dried, then the clothes is ironed or something like that. But in this situation, what I'm trying to say now is, you can say, to start with, the clothes is washed. Okay, that's my first stage. Then I can say the clothes is then ironed after it has been dried. I don't know if that makes sense to you. The cloth is ironed after it has been dried. So that word after makes the difference. Even though in on paper, if I'm writing, I said, okay, started with washing. Then when I'm writing now, I said then it's ironed after it's been dried. Okay. So that word after here makes the difference. So when you say ironed after it has been dried, that tells us automatically that drying comes, this is drying, sorry, that drying comes before ironing because of that word after that is in this place. I don't know if that makes sense. So if you said the process starts with washing of the clothes, then it is ironed after it has been dried. So that single sentence tells us that drying comes before ironing, even though I mentioned ironing before drying on paper. Okay, so after which it has been, after which is a good way to avoid you going from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3 and things like that. A good example, again, is what I have on the board here. You can say the rice is added and left to boil for 20 minutes after it must have been sorted and washed. Okay, so if you want to pick the key, the action words here is the rice is added. So you have like addition, maybe the stages, addition of the rice, adding, then left to boil, the boiling. Then after it must have been sorted, and you have sorting and washing. Okay, I've mentioned like 4 action words here. On paper, this is the sequence: adding, boiling, sorting, washing. That's the sequence on paper. But grammatically, when you look at it, the rice is added and left to boil for another 20 minutes. That's addition, then boiling, after it must have been sorted and washed. So when you look at it, it's obvious that sorting and washing comes before you add it and boiling it. So it's actually the sorting and boiling, the sorting and washing that comes first before you add it and boil. Obviously, for this area, we know that sorting and washing comes before addition of the rice. I don't know if that makes sense to you. So even though I described addition and boiling first, but because of the vocabulary of after here, that after it must have been sorted and washed, then So it's like you say, is it payment after service or something like that? So there's always this joke. I can't remember that. When you want someone to do something, say, I'll do it for you only after you have paid or after payment. So that tells you that payments needs to come first before the service. Okay. So when you put that in a good context, then it will help your grammatical presentation. I hope I'm not confusing you as well, but that's just that. If you are confused, you can ask your question. The problem for here is poor grouping. Okay, poor grouping. I don't know where the problem has gone to. Okay, but the problem here is poor grouping. So poor grouping here is just like not knowing when you move from body paragraph 1 to body paragraph 2. At what stage? In map now, I told you clearly in map, okay, body paragraph 1, you go from map 1. That was the same thing I told you for multiple charts. Body paragraph 2, you go from map 2. So you already have an idea of when to switch to body paragraph 2. Here in process now, you don't know when to move to the second body paragraph. And people end up writing so much in body paragraph 1, then they write scantily in the very scanty in the body paragraph 2. There needs to be a balance. Okay, so the good news is there is no hard and fast rule about it. You just divide the whole process logically into 2 and describe each part in the paragraph. Okay, and I'm trying to say you note the word logically, so discretion is advised. If it's a 5-stage process, then you could discuss the first 3 stages in body paragraph 1, then the other 2 stages in paragraph 2. If it's a 10 stages, then you could split them into equal half, maybe 5 stages in the first body paragraph, 5 other stages in the second body paragraph. Don't forget, there's no golden rule, no hard and fast rule about that. So it's just logically splitting them into 2 body paragraphs, but there needs to be a balance. If it's a 10 stage process, you don't do 8, you don't discuss 8 stages in body paragraph 1 and reserve 2 for body paragraph 2. That won't be a good progression for your essay. Okay, so the structure is still the same: introduction, overview, body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, and no conclusion. Okay, introduction is still the same thing you've been doing every time, just paraphrase. And the overview, unlike the other charts, there is no general trend in process. And I told you there's no key features to identify. There's no key features in process. All the features are key. Okay. So what you need to do is to identify the number of stages. If you look at the what's it called now? The marking guide, the Ielts marking guide for a band 7 overview. When you look at their guide, you will see where they put trend, stages, and differences. I mentioned this I think in our first class. Okay, these 3 keywords, these are not my words. You will find it exactly like that in the marking guide. And I told you, this is what makes a band 7 overview according to Ielts. And I've told you, the trend here relates to the graphs. The graphs, maybe the bar charts, the pie charts, line graph, that's the trend. That's what they want to see in the overview. The stages here relates to what we are talking about today, the process. And the differences relates to the map. Okay, we talk more about differences, what's different in the past and now, and things like that. You talk about more differences when you're talking about map. Okay, so the differences here is about the relates to the maps. Okay, so don't forget that. So very important, stages needs to be identified when you are talking about process. So for your overview, the number of stages, how the process begins and ends, what is being produced, where any material added at each stage and things like that. All these questions will not be applied to, all these points will not be applied to all the questions, but the first two, they are mandatory, they are statutory and sacrosanct, okay? The number of stages, I just told you that. Then how it begins and ends. It started with this and ended with this. Okay. The number of stages involved. Another question I used to deal with is about the number of stages. You don't have to be accurate with the number of stages, because I've seen situations where the same question, somebody will say, we pick it to be a 10 stages, 10 stage process. Another person will say it's just 8. Another person will say it's 9. It doesn't matter. You only have to be consistent. You don't start by telling us it involves 10 stages, and at the end of the day, you've mentioned just 8. Okay, so if you tell us it involves 20 stages, then in your description, in your body paragraph, we are expecting, you have already given us idea of what to expect. So we are expecting you to talk about, is it 20 stages you say it is? Okay, so it doesn't really matter if you all get the same, if you all interpret it the same way, it doesn't really matter or not. So you can interpret it and say, this process I'm looking now is 9 stages. A good example will be, if you look at the example I was giving about the rice sorting and kiniko earlier. If this happens to be a question now, some people will say this simple sentence now, some people will say it's 2 stages, some people will say it's 4 stages. Some people can say addition and boiling. Addition and boiling is a stage. Some people will say sorting and washing comes together as a stage. And they say, okay, it's just 2 stages. Some people will say it's just 3. Rice, addition of rice, 1. Boiling, 2. Sorting and washing, 3. Some people will say it's 4. Addition separately, boiling separately, sorting separately, washing separately. You say it's 4. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so if as long as you are still describing the same thing in your overview or whatever, if you tell us it involves 4 stages, then we are looking forward to seeing 4 major description in your body paragraph. And if you tell us it's 2, then you're already giving us an idea of what your grouping would look like. So you just have to be consistent. Okay. Now that we have paraphrased the question and provided an overview, we need to tell the examiner about each stage. So you say what each stage does, what is produced, if materials are added or not, and things like that. So you just need to talk about, and I've told you how you group them into stages. Okay. So this is just an example of a process. Telling you the diagram shows the production of cycle board, summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparison where relevant. You should write at least 150 words. So now they've labeled this process. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They put it down as 9 stages for us. And they started off with delivery of cycle board materials, then to delivery of the product to the factory. So it started with delivery of the raw materials, then then delivery of the cycle board to the end users. End users, that's the factories. So those are just the 2 key points there. Nine stages, then what it does at the beginning, what it does at the end. Then you put that together in a sentence, you'll be fine. Then you walk your way from one stage to another using those key descriptions we've been talking about since. I hope that is clear. So the flowchart describes how cycle boards are produced. Overall, it is evident that cycle boards production undergoes about 9 major processing stages, beginning from the supply of cycle board materials, culminating in the delivery of final products to the factories. Don't forget, I told you 2 things that are sacrosanct for the overview: the number of stages involved, then where it began and where it ended. Okay, so beginning from this, culminating in the delivery of final products to the factories. To start with, the cycle board materials delivered are cut and sprayed with fire retardant, then cleaned afterwards. Okay, then afterwards, thereafter, the cleaned board is soldered and the automatic IC is attached before visual inspection and quality control is done. Okay. Following this, the materials are sent for final level of testing, while the chips from the rejected boards are discarded at this point. Okay. Consequent upon the outcome of the final quality control checks, the materials could be reattached to the automatic inspection control and made to repeat the subsequent stages if the result is not satisfactory, while the approved boards would be delivered to the factories after they must have been packaged as appropriate. I decided to put this because that was what I was talking about the other time. If you read this last sentence, will be delivered to the factories after they must have been packaged as appropriate. So we already know they will have to be packaged. Packaging will come before delivery to the factories. But in this situation, you can see I described the delivery before the packaging. But don't forget the word after here. Okay, so they will be delivered to the factories after they must have been packaged and packaged as appropriate. I hope that makes sense to us. Okay, so let me find out if you have any question before. It's just a quick one on the process because you already had a class on that before, so you just need to walk us through it. So if you have any question, can you please just raise up your hand before we close for tonight? Any question, please?